fabulous to be here, and I want to actually bring us to things we can do now, and do now together with communities all across the country that can change the health and well-being and long-term prosperity of this country. Because I got to tell you, I agree with you. I think nothing less than the future of this country is at stake in our third century because of our health. We're putting everything at risk, and Ahmed was right in the beginning. This nation, our health status is our greatest internal security threat. And we either own that and step up to it, or just go to another conference. All right, thank you. So I loved where Lloyd started us off today. We're not just hunkering down. There is something wanting to happen here. Partnerships, investment, data. I mean, we just talked about the acronym of action. And I have to say, and I want to say this and be actually quite transpartisan here in my talk, that I think this is an extraordinary time of opportunity. I don't know that in my lifetime there's ever been more of an open field for something bold to happen, right? There's a lot of things that are tremendously uncertain, and there are a few things that are quite certain, and I could unpack them, but one of the things that's true is that in the relative chaos, a clear policy and investment strategy for the health of the country could actually emerge. It's actually possible. So that's what I'd like to be able to talk about as we move forward. I get to have dinner with my daughter tonight. She's 24, lives here in DC, and thinking of IOM reports, she came home not so long ago with one of the reports that said that children born today will live 5 years less than their parents. And she knows that her whole life I've been out trying to build healthier communities, and her comment to me is, what have you been doing? Right? I mean, that's really the underlying question. It's like, on our watch, we know, we've been talking about it our whole lives, most of us in this room, what's been actually happening. So with our eyes of our kids upon us, I think the question is, really, what will it be? So I'm going to go right to the bottom line. If there's any punchline right now, it's that I believe that what is modeled in at least 1,000 place-based community collaborations that bring business, government, nonprofit leadership together, faith, community, media, and so forth, Republicans and Democrats, people of very different perspectives, to actually identify what local priorities are and move them forward, I think it's the most important thing happening in the country. It's completely below the radar because it doesn't have a lot of flash around it, and yet it's actually local democracy and great thinking in cities. Mayors get it completely. It doesn't matter red, blue, or otherwise. And so what can we learn about that kind of leadership for what we need to do at the state and federal policy level? One is that we know about these partnerships, they're transpartisan, right? It just doesn't matter. Of course, the perspectives matter and people bring it, but at the end of the day, it's what works and how do we move it forward. Secondly, there's all these issues and co-benefits that we've been talking about. And, okay, so you do a healthy food finance initiative. Is that improving health? Yes. Is it building local jobs? Yes. Full-service grocery stores in disadvantaged communities? Yes, yes, yes. Well, it's a strategy that has multiple co-benefits, lowering food miles, carbon footprint, et cetera. Co-benefit. These, therefore, have tremendous impact to different sectors. So if you show up in one of those things, it doesn't matter if you don't care about health. If it's actually creating green jobs in your community, in a disadvantaged community, you do it for your own reasons. And that's okay. We don't need to line up at the level of vision all the time. Strategy will work, right, when in fact it touches your bottom line. And we know that from our communities. It works across jurisdictions. We know we have to work across ages. In fact, I'm thrilled there's so many young people, and everybody's young these days, but I'm thrilled there's so many relative young people in this room here today who I can already tell are leading the charge. But we need to be thinking not only what does it look like from a conception to kindergarten perspective, but what does it look like towards later part of life. And that's going to require transformational leadership. So these are my trans issues. Right? And I think this is actually what our leadership needs to look like. So I took the liberty of because I'm leading a new organization. It's a new nonprofit foundation focused on advancing the mental, social, and spiritual health of the country. You're the first persons to hear the name that is no longer called Institute for Mental Health and Wellness. It's called Wellbeing Trust, and that'll be announced next week, but hope you all like that. A new national foundation dedicated to transforming the well-being of the country, and I just wanted to mention that this is actually what we're up to: easing access to care, building resilience for children, family, and youth, reducing suffering from anxiety and depression, decreasing addiction, creating hope, eliminating stigma all across that. Norming having conversations about mental and behavioral health, where our conversations aren't about some character flaw or moral failure. It's actually just who we are as we struggle with the things we all struggle with in our families. And these issues touch every single one of us, either personally, so forth. And what's underneath that, of course, is creating equitable, healthy communities, because you just can't address those sensitive issues unless we do the fundamentals that are here, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited about this. But before I did that, I was at Kaiser Permanente, so I have some interesting data for you, right? This is the Bay Area. And apologies, for those that aren't familiar, that's San Francisco. There's the Golden Gate Bridge. That's wealthier Marin County. Here's Oakland over here, where I live, right downtown, San Leandro. This is a heat map. You're familiar with the data. Cool is good, red is hot. Obesity is the map that we're looking at right now. You could look at it and go, well, sure, San Francisco, relatively wealthier. What's new? Of course, it's going to be cooler, lower rates of obesity. Asthma rates. Now you can look at housing stock, vehicle emissions, and all things that would drive asthma also occurring in a relatively affluent area. That's the Marina area and so forth. Depression, money can't buy you love, right? That's really reminding us of this, right? All this great data that we have here. Diabetes rates, interesting, encroaching in some areas, but now the lower income areas on the East Bay, maybe more and more familiar. Hypertension, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you'd say, well, gosh, that's great health data. Well, I want to tell you that this is Kaiser Permanente member data. So this means that, because Kaiser is sort of hit in all of its market the highest quality health plan. I say that with respect to others, great, but as an integrated delivery system, highest quality health plan in its markets. So everybody's getting the same high quality care, right? And yet, here's place matters. It's actually worse than that. This is Kaiser Permanente's employee data. Rolled up, 200,000 employees, not all there, but so you get the sense of how much we in the health sector need partnership to do anything, even when you're a top drawer health provider, health plan that's integrated and theoretically incentivized and at risk for improving health. No matter what the heck we do, we have to partner with everybody to do anything to go at risk. So that really opens the larger issue of kind of why this partnership is so essential to the people who run $3.2 trillion in the economy. Secretary Dreisner today talked about Medicaid. The entire U.S. health spend at $3.2 trillion makes that the 5th largest economy in the world, after Germany and Japan and the US and so forth, right? That's how big it is. Okay, Cleveland, here you go. 8-mile difference, 24 years from where I live in downtown Oakland, on the other side of Highway 980, like a 3-minute bike ride from my house, 15-year life expectancy. And that's how significant this really means and why we need partnership. We're all familiar with the triple aim. And you know, how does a provider provide the best quality care at the best possible price? But when you start to go at risk in movement from volume to value, or like Kaiser and others that are integrated health systems, you're actually trying to keep people healthier in the first place. So we have to learn how to improve health. And again, back to the other data, we know from determinants that that's all outside. So to do that, we need to create a market that values health. At the Federal Reserve Bank in New York on Monday, a report will be issued, a book will be issued, and one of the chapters in there that we helped write is on a market that values health. And where's my friend from Aetna who spoke earlier? So articulately, yes, beautiful. I don't want to cross the line, but what I heard you say is that, of course, she's with a large insurance company, for profit, all this kind of stuff. She said she was on a bargain shopping spree. Is that right? What that means is that she is a buyer of health. She doesn't produce it. She wants to buy it. And she knows that she's got to come to a room like this where housers are, people who have healthy, fresh, affordable food, home care, all of that, because that's the way that it has to work. That's where the transformation of healthcare from providers of care become buyers or purchasers from what community provides. And that means this era of, just flipping grants and all of that has to move on. I hope it's not too irreverent, but it's towards the end of the day. We've actually talked in grant making about how a lot of philanthropies essentially, God goes help follow in Brian's footprint, essentially pimp out nonprofits. You know what I mean? You're really that desperate? Well, we'll keep you afloat. Just keep your thing going out there. We're going to have to move, and I'll talk more about it in a minute, to contractual relationships with people who produce health as a value proposition, because our health sector has to move that way. And that will change all of the partnerships and relationships, and why we need to build capacity to move not into another 2-3 year grant cycle, but long-term contracts with data, with finance that's actually going to have to be part of that. So 3 quick lessons and then the big idea here. One is that, and I'm going to call these 3 ethical imperatives. I think they're business imperatives, but I want to speak to the ethics of it in the first place. One is that most of the grants and the work that we do is insufficient to create any sustained behavior change. Healthy school food this, physical activity that. When you remove the program, does the behavior change actually stick? Most of what we learned at Kaiser Permanente after 10 years of advancing is the answer is no. We were ineffective. Now, that doesn't mean there hasn't been good work, and I'm not trying to denigrate the field. I'm just saying that it hasn't added up. So all these things we do, we changed half the vending slots. We create a vending ban. Whole school reform. Is that enough to create sustained behavior change? Absolutely not. You start talking about the corner store conversion and full-service grocery stores and maybe. And once you know that other stuff doesn't add up, it is an ethical, what should we say? Disaster. And it's actually a lie to continue to invest in things that we know don't actually add up to change in the name of that change, right? Walk to school day, school year, et cetera, all of that's beautiful. Streets, that's 10 minutes to Q&A, right? Great. Complete streets, yes. By itself, are any of those things enough? No. We have to do all of it at the same time, with physical activity reform and complete streets and the supply and demand. And when we start to do that with sufficient reach, intensity, and duration, then maybe sustained behavior change. And anything less than that, either both doesn't add up and perpetuating it is, what should we say? That's the moral failure, right? Okay, that's the first, focusing on dose. Secondly, healthcare has to make the assessment and referral to non-medical needs a standard of care. Quality must include referral to non-medical needs. It is no longer acceptable to be treating somebody's diabetes and then send them back to a food desert and say, good luck. Now, I know we're all better than that in the healthcare sector, but it's not really much different than that. So until we can say, tell me a little bit about your housing realities. Are you food secure? And have those conversations. And then not just say, well, there's a resource over there, but make the warm handoff. Have the data system. Where's my friend that was telling me about the data system she has about an hour ago? Is she here? Anyway. Oh, you. Yes. Remember your organization name. Sorry. Yeah, Unite Us, right? And I'm sure there are others, but here you are putting a data platform together and connecting to referral that would make ultimately data transfer around those outcomes and ultimately reimbursement in this relationship different. This has to happen with meaningful, warm handoffs to navigation. Otherwise, when you're at risk in a market that values health, right? You're at risk. We have to do this. And that's why we need to, again, build partnership. And third, we have to move from doing good things to accountability. And what I really want to get at with this is the anchor institution strategy. I don't know if you know that during the same exact time as this meeting's been going on, a mile from here at the Kaiser Center for Total Health has been a meeting of over 30 healthcare organizations who are talking about how they do anchor institution work, right? And we got that started late last year. Kaiser was a part, Providence St. Joseph Health, a lot of other health systems, some of which are in the room, were part of that. Meaning that not only how do we do our community benefit spend, but how do we use our investment portfolio? Like, for example, at Kaiser, these are big numbers, but it's all relative. Community benefit was $2 billion a year. Payroll is $22 billion a year. So how are we investing in workforce pipelines from the lowest income communities? We were expanding in Baltimore. We're going to put a new medical center there and put a few grants out and think anything's going to be different in Freddie Gray's neighborhood? Again, ethical question. So how do we partner with workforce pipelines? Same thing with procurement. $2 billion in community benefit, $20 billion in procurement. How are we bringing those dollars to women and minority-owned firms, into communities there to drive the economic flywheel that we know is upstream? So that, the investment portfolios for doing impact investing, all of that is essential for healthcare to have enough reach, intensity, and duration for the impact. Those are three critical imperatives. Now, my time is short. I'm not sure how to exactly do this, but I just want to tell you a little story because when the FedEx executive shows up. So I went to a healthy community meeting in Taiwan, which is where this building is from, and there were 40 different cities from across Taiwan in the room, and there was a titan of industry there running a multi-billion-dollar company at the meeting, and we asked him at dinner, why are you here? Right? With all these nice, healthy community people. And he said, well, you don't know much about us, do you? He said, first of all, our morals are different than yours in the United States. We believe health care is a right, and so we gave everybody a health card because that's who we are. That's our values. You know, you guys are different, but we stand for that. And secondly, he says, let me tell you about the economics of it, which is that we know that in the global economy where land, labor, capital, intellectual property moves equally, and that one day we're a little more higher quality or a little lower cost, we compete on that, that because we are at risk for 99% of Taiwanese by giving them a health card, we invest in healthy communities because that's how we lower sick care costs and make our economy more productive. We think that margin is 12 to 15%, and that, my friend from America, is the basis upon which we will whip you. That was his economic case. And I showed him this slide at that meeting. It was part of my deck, and he sent me this one back, which I thought was very cute. Just, you know, that's just how they do it over there. So to Norris's point and others, how do we become investment and policy advisors for the health and well-being of our communities? So we're really creating this. It is all connected. We know this is true. We've been talking about it, etc. So in my last couple of minutes, I'd like to put something on the table and then open a question. For those of us in the healthcare sector, and all of us are sort of in health broadly, just remember, we're 18 to 20% of the economy. We're the largest employers in most of the communities. Our boards know everybody and are connected with everybody. Everybody's welcome in our door. We practice radical inclusion for the most part, right? And. What else could you say about the health sector? It's big, it's powerful, it's purchasing power. And yet it participates in healthy communities as if it was a lightweight. I'm going to work on trying to upset the other half of the people that you didn't, right? I mean, really? And you even see it in what we're talking about, the Affordable Care. Of course we have to defend the right for everybody to have access to a medical home and essential health services. That matters for both value and long-term economic reasons. And yet where are we on all the determinants of health? Almost nowhere. So that's who we are, kind of punching below our weight, if you want to think about it that way. What do we know about dose, about being an anchor institution, about meaningful? What else have we actually learned over the last few years that's real, that matters? Medical homes, adverse community experience creates toxic stress. What else? Help me. Right? We've learned a lot. And yet we aren't practicing it at scale. And at the very same time as we are looking in this country at gutting HUD, at completely gutting the Surface Transportation Act on its walkable, bikeable strategies, on a farm bill that's going to move completely different way than a healthy food bill. We are almost silent. Almost silent, except in our nice left side of the slide way, where, oh, well, you know, it's a determinant of health. We ought to talk about it. So here's what I'm going to suggest about health and all policies, all practices, all investments, is that it is time to do something very different in the country. There are at least 1,000 place-based partnerships that have developed local priority sets that know what they want their state legislature to do and what they would like to see from Washington. But we have never rolled up that platform. So what we're poised to do now, and invitations open, a number of us groups, American Hospital Association, 100 Million Healthier Lives, Rethink, a couple other health organizations, Stakeholder Health, and others in the room, Prevention Institute and others, are asking the question, how could we reach out to every community in the country, ask them for their priorities, what they would like to see from the State House in Washington, do a pattern analysis on what America's communities are saying, red, blue, and otherwise, have a healthy community agenda that is essentially a reflection of what America's communities are saying, give that back to the communities so that every community can talk with each of their state legislators, each of their senators, and each of their members of Congress and say, we are behind you if you have the courage to stand up in your committee meetings for the things that improve health. Red, blue, and otherwise. This transpartisan local group is giving you an investment agenda. And by the way, this matches what all the other communities are saying, because we know it's all the same stuff, right? And these conversations are happening in 990 other communities with your colleagues. So let us create a healthy community investment strategy rooted in the best of local democracy that lifts up what our communities know and create a national platform at it and help our elected leaders have enough spine to invest in what will create health and build a strong third American century. Because I think we're sitting on the solution, and if we don't take it on, we're in the puppy land, kitty land. So that's my challenge, and the floor is open for dialogue. Thank you. I think there are mics right there. Thoughts about anything I said? Do you think we could get a Voice of America's communities of, by, and for and change the dialogue here in this fine city? Right here. Thank you, my friend from Denver.
I loved your talk. Bill Berman from Denver. The other part of the conversation I would bring in is you could characterize the last election as rural versus urban. And if you look at those maps, they are stark by election results by county. And it strikes me that, just like your comments, we're sitting on a great commonality. Where is Medicaid needed more in the United States than any place? I know for my state, it's not my city. It's not, quote, the inner city. It's rural counties.
Colorado.
And so I think we need to, it's all too easy, those of us at big cities, to work in our own reality of big cities. And yet I think what you articulated gives us the possibility of bridging to rural communities. And that's how we can make this transpartisan.
I love it. Thank you. Beautiful. Beautifully said. Yeah. Right here. Wonderful.
So talk to me about hope. Hope was on one of your slides.
Yes.
Create hope. What role does hope play in community health and wellness, and why did you choose that as one of your primary objectives for part of this new organization?
Yeah, it's really, we've been kind of associating this with the thought of serious and persistent mental illness and deep anxiety and depression, where folks are so struggling so deeply, and that hope feels lost at times. And we all know it, we've experienced it, or have loved ones that have as well. The thing that feels to me both true there, but also kind of back to what was just being discussed about like in rural America, is that there's a part about hope where we're not seeing what we think we want to see actually happen. And my sense is that it's because we have not given people a meaningful handle on the ability to do work that creates outcomes. And so we're not really seeing the impact, we're not really getting it from Washington, and I think there's a tremendous loss of hope that actually what I do matters, what's happening matters, that these longer-term strategies matter. And so I think part of what we're really needing to do in our communities, and maybe it's the basis of this, is how do we help people connect with the thing that they can do that has some efficacy, some contribution, where at the end of the day, rather than sort of an apathy, which I don't think people really are, it's that they actually feel that what they do is mattering, and that actually brings hope that there is a chance for me to do something, be something, and things will happen that will make it improve. So I think hope is vital. Others, please.
Hi, Chamisa from Catholic Health Initiatives,
Yes.
also in Denver.
Nice to see you, yes.
Nice to see you. I thought that your anecdote about the Taiwanese meeting and just the sort of bombastic or bravado in the way that he presented that is sort of a new language that we're hearing
Yes.
in this country. How do we bring that kind of a presentation to the folks that need to hear it, our policymakers and our politicians who are talking in a new way, at least from my perspective, so that they can really get that message that this is not just about health and healthcare and community and all the pretty stuff they might call social justice, and that it's economic as well.
Thank you for the question, and I feel like it lives in the territory of how do we move from being purveyors of projects and programs and initiatives to being investment and policy advisors for the health and wealth of the country. And that therefore we need to have investment strategies like we see in our community partnerships and lift them up in that way, in a way that business person can. I think, as was said before, our business leaders get it. It is making American business uncompetitive globally and is threatening their sheer existence, the cost of healthcare, not to mention, I had an Intel executive tell me the other day that he and other business leaders are saying anxiety in the U.S. is costing American business $300 billion a year. Depression's $400 billion a year. So there's not a question about is it expensive and is it hurting business. It's what's the investment strategy that actually has a possibility of an impact. And I think that's the information that our communities are sitting on that need to be harvested. That's the shopping spree we need to go on as leading businesses who are saying where. So I think it's our community investment strategies need to be rolled up and sharpened and brought to our state legislators in Washington. Yeah, thank you. Sure.
So what you said is both logical and in keeping with all of the conversations we've been having here. But one of the tools that we were exposed to in one of the sessions was the pre-mortem, sort of thinking about what can possibly go wrong that we can't anticipate. So what's the counter argument to this proposal, or how can it go bad?
That's a great question. I'd love to hear anybody add to that. I think the first thing that I would think go bad, and this is like what I think about, is it goes flat, that it goes nowhere, that who cares? In a city that's essentially run by business and where we know when you talk to an elected leader privately, they'll tell you what it's like to be on the make for money all day long. It breaks their hearts. Most of them are good people, and yet they're so caught up in that. So how do we, public health, primary care, but that's why I'm saying healthcare is such a big sector, we have to be able to do it. But that's what I get afraid of, is that it's just not enough to break through. And then I start thinking we need another constitutional convention. But maybe this is a step towards that. How about that, right? But that's me. I think it may go flat. Will it actually get on the radar? What else could go wrong? Like everything, right?
For your very thought-provoking words today. I'd like to just get some more clarity on, I'm Brenda Gray from the UW, Wisconsin School
Yes.
of Medicine and Public Health, and our work is connecting the workforce to the future public health crisis and the healthcare crisis, but you talked about the investment strategies. Can you give a little more insight on that, please?
Yeah, I think, and I guess I'd love to, again, some ground truthing from folks in the room. I believe that, for example, there's some friends from Live Well Omaha here, right? You know, were here, and they may have had to run towards their plane just a little bit ago. That's a place-based partnership in Omaha that's had about 4 different names. It's 25 years old. They have thought through early childhood development, kindergarten to school. They have talked about school food. They have created safety strategies. They have made investments in walkable, bikeable downtowns and redeveloped downtown in a complete street way. This is a 25-year multi-sector collaborative effort. When I was out there a couple of years ago, the state legislature in Lincoln was actually looking to Live Well Omaha to shape what are the investments that you've seen that actually work. And that, you know, mature place-based partnership that survived it had a whole array, if you will, we'll just move into investment language, a portfolio of investments in everything from complete streets to early childhood development, to scaling access to healthy, fresh food, to affordable housing that had support services that were tied to support people with mental, emotional health issues, et cetera, serious and persistent mental illness. They had a strategy of all of that was radically underfunded, but they had an evidence base and a set of strategies to work. That's what I think exists in many communities. It could be sharpened, polished, made more rigorous, no doubt about it. And there's a massive spectrum of quality and efficacy. I'm picking on one that I think's good. But you take these partnerships from Somerville, Massachusetts to, you know, what I know Dora's helping lead in Southern California. That's what I'm suggesting. Is that getting at your question? And it may need to be sharpened with how many years is a return? How much dollars? What do you project a return to actually be? Where is that? We have a big wrong pocket problem. Of course, you invest here and then it doesn't come back to the health sector. But that's what I'm suggesting exists in America's communities that could be lifted up. And the most powerful part of it is the transpartisan multi-sector constituency that's behind it. And the wildest part of it is if you take any of these multi-sector partnerships and the leadership in it, business, government, nonprofit, they know these elected leaders. They go to parties with them, and yet at the same time, we haven't really connected it and saying, hey, when the Farm Bill comes up or Surface Transportation Act, this is why this is important. And I think that's the might we need to actually build when we know what the determinants are. Others? Please.
So you were talking earlier about politics of it and what that looks like and a platform, and so it makes me think. One side typically thinks public health. They think this is great. What are we adding for tax? And one other side may think something else. So to me, what's the give up? So
What's the give up?
What do we have to give up, or are we? When they ask that question, okay, nobody ever says we don't want to be better, healthier. I don't care if you're red, white, blue, whatever. Everybody wants to be healthier. Nobody ever says no physical activity, go away, any of that stuff. So what do we have to give up, or what do we have to be taxed on, in your opinion, or is it just an investment? And again, we'll come back later, where it leads me to a second question is, public health results don't happen in an election cycle, so it's difficult to get credit for something and get elected over it.
Frankly, I think we're going to have to give up on expecting market rate profits in a sick care system. And we talked about a lot of companies that we do a lot of work to protect in this country that essentially both purvey and profit from the things that drive poor health. I grew up in Idaho. I'm a red state kid. And believe it or not, I was actually the president of my college Republican group, right? It's true. And here's my view on sugar-sweetened beverages. They ought to pay their way. That's a total conservative view, right? Why should American taxpayers subsidize cheap, empty calories that we know we pay for through Medicaid. Nobody's saying you can't have a Coke, but it ought to pay its way. So for me, I think there's a whole series of things that we may not necessarily have to give up, but we may have to let go of sort of the sacrosanct idea that we are supportive of all business at any cost. And we're going to need to have businesses who pay their way for whatever the impacts are. Essentially, I think Thomas Friedman said it well about the country. He said, we are brilliant at privatizing profits, socializing risk, and socializing cost, privatizing profits, socializing cost, and underestimating risk. And so the investment strategy I'm talking about brings that back in and makes sure that things pay their way so that taxpayers aren't subsidizing the profits, essentially. And probably healthcare needs to shrink dramatically. And those dollars need to go in the things we know: education, job development, access to healthy food, transportation. We need to reorient. And that's going to be painful because it's jobs and backbone and all of that. And I work for one. So we'll see if I have my job Monday.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this dialogue and all of the points that you made. It's really inspiring. And most importantly, I love that you're challenging us to take action. So a colleague of mine has been texting me. She was at the obesity conference in Southern California. I think Kaiser underwrote that.
Yeah.
And she said that according to some data that Kaiser shared, that Pepsi consumption went down by 40% in California. Coca-Cola consumption decreased by 20%. So I have a couple questions related to those data points. I don't know enough about it, but that's what was texted to me. One, I see risk with that. I imagine there's going to be a lot of pushback from those companies. And what can we do to prepare for the pushback and use that energy of the pushback to align with our strategies would be my first question. And then the second, if indeed those changes are occurring, I don't see the positive impact of the decrease in the consumption of those beverages necessarily yet.
Yeah.
Right. So just any comment that you have on that would be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I know that we're within a couple minutes, so I want to respect that. So I want to try and answer, but I want to say the first thing, which is that that's exactly the question or the types of questions we need to be asking about this kind of an investment strategy. There's a Buddhist saying about a koan, right? A wicked question, as is often called in complexity, that just bothers you. It's like a pebble in your shoe. And I think a question like that is exactly the kind of question that we need to be asking if we're going to have an investment strategy that holds water. The other thing is that I think we're going to have to look at a time frame. We're so used to term of office and quarterly returns that, to your point, gosh, the sales are down, but are we seeing reduction in or improvement in health status? And not right away. How many of you have kids? Now, mine are 22 and 24. This seems to keep going on. How long does this take? Right? How long is this enterprise? Right? So I'm going to suggest that we need to bring a generational view, right, to this work and have the courage to be investment and policy advisors for the long-term health and well-being and equitable prosperity of the country with a massive lens on the equity realities that face our country and recognize that the return on that may be a little bit like what I get to do tonight, which is to go have dinner with my 24-year-old daughter who it wasn't just because we read to her in third grade, a lifetime, right, of raising and nurturing and mistakes and skinned knees and is it working out and feeling like we're disastrous parents and accidents that scared us and all of that. And somehow, it's the long-term kind of view that we have as parents. And I think that's what we need to have as citizens. I think that's what the framers of our Constitution, the women and men that courageously built this country stood for. I'm reminded here that I have less than a minute. I'm thinking about, this maybe needs to be it. At the end of, thinking about the Constitutional Convention, at the end of the Constitutional Convention of the one in this country, in Philadelphia, it was said that Benjamin Franklin was one of the first ones out the door, and of course they locked the media out, and so they swarmed him when he came out the door after these weeks, and they said, "What is it? What is it? What is it?" And he said, "It's a republic, if you can keep it." So I will issue an invitation to join the Healthy Community Agenda, and thank you for your time. Great.